The galaxy was a vast and complex place, home to countless species, some of them sophisticated beyond imagination, others primitive and savage. Yet, across all the civilizations, one unifying assumption persisted: children were harmless, innocent, and fragile. They were the future of their species, sure, but they were not the immediate threat. In fact, they were the opposite, a symbol of hope, renewal, and potential. There was no need to fear them. The Galactic Empire, known for its brutal conquests and advanced technologies, operated on this fundamental belief. They had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the annihilation of entire civilizations, and the ascension of new powers, but never had they encountered a species where the young were anything other than weak and malleable. Until now. Earth, a relatively unassuming planet nestled in a quiet corner of the galaxy, had attracted the attention of the Empire's leaders. While they were aware of Earth's potential, with its abundant resources and strategically placed position in the sector, they hadn't expected much beyond the usual dealings with a newly discovered species. The humans, after all, were still in their infancy as a galactic power, limited by their primitive technology and divided political systems. Their adult population was strong, resilient, and capable of extraordinary feats, but what really caught the Empire's attention were their advances in artificial intelligence, bioengineering, and weaponry. The Empire had long since established a policy of non-interference with species deemed insignificant, but Earth was different. It was ripe for exploitation. A diplomatic envoy was dispatched to Earth, led by a team of top-tier experts from various departments: science, military, diplomacy, and culture. Their mission was clear: establish peaceful relations, determine the best way to extract resources, and subtly assess whether humanity's potential could serve the Empire's needs. What the diplomats did not anticipate was the peculiar behavior of the human children. The initial contact was anything but dramatic. The diplomats entered Earth's atmosphere with the grace and efficiency that was typical of their technologically superior ships. Upon landing, they were greeted by Earth's governing bodies, who offered a hospitable welcome, eager to show off their planet's beauty and resources. The diplomats were shown the usual displays: picturesque cities, vast agricultural fields, and signs of technological growth. But as their mission progressed, they became aware of something unsettling. It wasn't the human adults, who were predictable and easily categorized. It was the children. One morning, the diplomats attended a field trip, ostensibly to observe a school group visiting a local wildlife reserve. The purpose was to engage with Earth's young in an educational context, a show of goodwill and curiosity. The trip took place at a large reserve in a rural area, where children were encouraged to interact with the animals. This was, the diplomats soon realized, where things took an unexpected turn. Human children displayed an uncanny calmness in the presence of some of Earth's most dangerous creatures. Lions, tigers, and bears roamed freely, yet the children showed no signs of fear. In fact, they appeared to connect with the animals in a way that was completely inexplicable. It wasn't just a matter of taming the creatures, it was as though the animals were actively responding to the children's emotional states. They didn't just coexist, they seemed to communicate. The way a child might pet a cat or a dog on their planet, these children could effortlessly soothe a bear, calm a wild tiger, or make a venomous snake sit still. The animals didn't react with aggression, as they would toward an unfamiliar adult, but instead displayed an almost hypnotic docility. The diplomats were taken aback. These were not mere acts of bravery or controlled interactions. The children appeared to possess an innate understanding of the creatures they were surrounded by, a deep empathy that seemed to transcend mere biology. A few of the Empire's scientists, who specialized in xenobiology and animal behavior, began theorizing that humans may have some previously unknown psychic ability, something far beyond the realm of anything other species could accomplish. The more they observed, the more questions arose. How could children, who were so young, exude such power? Could it be some form of Earth-based technology at play, hidden within the children's behavior? Or was it something much older, perhaps even biological in nature? The diplomats, while intrigued, were cautious. They had no immediate explanation, but they knew that the children were becoming an unpredictable element in their mission. Something in the air had shifted, and the diplomatic team was now walking on fragile ground. Then, as if to confirm their worst suspicions, the situation escalated. One child, a girl of about 10 years old, stepped too close to a group of wild wolves. She had been showing her classmates how she could make the animals trust her, but something went wrong. One of the wolves, agitated by the presence of so many strangers, lashed out. It lunged at the girl, but instead of retreating, she extended her hand toward it. At that moment, everything seemed to happen at once. The child's presence seemed to amplify, and suddenly, the surrounding animals, all predators, went into a frenzy. The lions roared. The tigers began pacing in wild circles. The wolves, usually so composed, howled in unison, breaking the silence of the reserve with their frantic cries. The diplomats scrambled for cover, their training in high-stress situations kicking in as they attempted to organize an evacuation. But it was too late. The situation quickly spiraled out of control. The children, unaware of their own role in the chaos, tried to retreat, but the animals, wild, untamed, and now irrationally protective, swarmed in every direction. One diplomat barely escaped with his life, while another had his arm injured as he was pushed by panicked students trying to flee. Amidst the chaos, the children continued to show no fear, almost as if they had expected it all along. In the aftermath, the diplomats were left shaken and unsure of how to proceed. They had underestimated the human children, viewing them as a secondary concern, a mere afterthought to their mission. But the events at the wildlife reserve had changed everything. It was clear now that Earth's children were unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. There was more to them, more than any of their sophisticated, vast knowledge had prepared them for. The diplomats returned to their ship in haste, their minds reeling with the implications of what they had just witnessed. The decision to move forward with their mission seemed far more complicated now. What was once a simple mission of observation had transformed into a high-stakes game of survival. The Empire had come to Earth with the belief that the adults would be the challenge, but they had overlooked one vital detail: the children, with their terrifying unpredictability and raw power, were a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. In the days that followed the disastrous field trip, the diplomats found themselves deeply shaken by what they had witnessed. They had arrived with a clear mission: establish contact with Earth's inhabitants, assess their resources, and determine how best to integrate them into the Empire's vast intergalactic network. They had expected Earth's adults to be a formidable challenge. But the children were an unknown variable, one that could not be easily categorized or controlled. The diplomats were forced to reassess everything. What had initially appeared to be an incident of simple, if unexplainable, behavior among the children was now viewed in a different light. Their natural ability to bond with dangerous creatures was not something that could be brushed aside. There was no evidence of technological intervention, no signs of taming or manipulation through training. This was something deeper, something innate, an ability that ran through the children's very biology. The situation grew even more perplexing as the days wore on. On Earth's surface, life continued as normal for the human children, but the diplomats couldn't shake the memory of that field trip. The child who had inadvertently caused the chaos at the wildlife reserve, her name was Emily, seemed completely unaware of the destruction she had nearly caused. She had continued her day, unscathed, with no understanding of the powers she had just unleashed. This left the diplomats with more questions than answers. The growing fear among the Empire's leadership was palpable. They had come to Earth with the belief that the planet's resources would be easily extractable, but now they faced a far greater problem. It was one thing to conquer a species of war-hardened adults, but the possibility of dealing with a race whose children held such raw, unpredictable power was another matter entirely. As the diplomat team continued to observe the planet, they noticed more and more signs of strange occurrences surrounding the children. At another school, a group of children in a classroom had triggered a localized electromagnetic pulse, knocking out power for blocks in every direction. The source of the disturbance was undetermined, but the children appeared completely unaware of what they had done. They had simply been playing a game when the event occurred. Yet, the power failure wasn't just random, it was highly specific, affecting only the nearby infrastructure, as though their very presence was somehow interfering with the natural flow of energy. This was no longer a case of coincidental, harmless behavior. The diplomats now understood that the children were far more than just unpredictable. They were capable of things that no other species' children could even dream of. They were tied to the fabric of Earth in a way that was completely foreign to the Empire's knowledge. Some of the diplomats, particularly the scientists and military strategists, began to hypothesize that the children's powers could be a natural extension of Earth's unique environment. The planet was teeming with life, and the children seemed to tap into this vitality, connecting not just with animals but with the planet itself. The more they delved into the situation, the more they realized that the children's powers were not just about animal communication. In some cases, they seemed to be able to alter the environment in profound ways. A child, for instance, could cause plants to grow at an accelerated rate with nothing more than a gentle touch, as though the child's very presence coaxed the earth into responding to them. This inexplicable phenomenon seemed to go far beyond what any known species could achieve, even with the most advanced technology. The diplomats were forced to acknowledge that they were dealing with something unprecedented, an entire generation of humans born with powers that could rival the mightiest beings the galaxy had ever known. As the Empire's top leaders debated the next course of action, a serious divide began to form within their ranks. Some argued that the children were merely an extension of humanity's general potential, a product of evolution that could be studied and eventually harnessed. There were whispers of using the children as weapons, to manipulate their powers for the Empire's benefit. After all, if they could bend the natural world to their will, surely their abilities could be replicated or controlled. It seemed like the perfect way to gain an edge in galactic warfare. But there were others who feared the consequences of underestimating Earth's children any further. They warned that even if the children were controlled or exploited, their powers were far too dangerous to be harnessed without serious risks. The unknown nature of their abilities made them a wild card, one that could easily turn against the Empire. The fact that the children appeared to have no control over their powers made them even more unpredictable. If the Empire sought to exploit them, there was a very real chance that the results would spiral out of control. Some diplomats began advocating for a different approach: contain the children, study them in a controlled environment, and, if necessary, neutralize the threat they posed before it could escalate further. Tensions mounted as the diplomats continued to collect data and observe the human children. The growing unease among the Empire's leadership only fueled the urgency of the mission. Several days passed with little more than passive observation, but it was clear that Earth's children were becoming the focal point of the mission. The adults, strong and capable as they were still no match for the sheer unpredictability of the children's abilities. The Empire's diplomats now realized that their plan to merely observe and extract resources had to be revised. The children were the key. In a high-level briefing, the Empire's leadership made a decision. They could not afford to leave Earth without fully understanding the scope of humanity's hidden power. It was time to take action. A covert mission was approved, the capture of a small group of human children for study. If the Empire could understand the extent of their powers, perhaps they could learn to control them, or, at the very least, neutralize the threat before it became too great. The operation was swift. In the dead of night, the children were taken from their homes, disoriented, confused, and unaware of the larger forces at play. The diplomats, now under orders to initiate the extraction, took them aboard a high-security ship for transport back to the Empire's research facilities. But the diplomats were already starting to realize that they were not simply dealing with a biological anomaly. They had underestimated the children's capacity for chaos, and they would soon learn just how dangerous it would be to try and control them. The stage was set for a deeper conflict, one that would soon reveal just how far-reaching Earth's children's powers really were, and how perilous it could be to try and cage that power. The Empire's decision to abduct the children set in motion a series of events that would spiral quickly out of control. The diplomats, now fully aware that Earth's children held untold powers, thought they could control the situation through careful study and containment. But they underestimated the resilience and intelligence of the young humans, as well as the volatile nature of their abilities. The children, ranging in age from 7 to 12, were taken from their homes under the cover of night, their memories of the event clouded by confusion and fear. They were isolated from their families, transported in complete secrecy to a remote Imperial research facility. The Empire's scientists, eager to uncover the secrets of these children's extraordinary abilities, had prepared high-tech containment units, designed to restrict movement and neutralize any form of psychic manipulation. Yet, they were unaware that they were about to face a challenge unlike any they had encountered before. At first, the Empire's scientists tried the standard approach: study, observe, and collect data. But the children's abilities were proving far more difficult to analyze than they had anticipated. The tests they performed yielded no definitive answers. Attempts to measure the extent of the children's power were met with strange and unexplainable phenomena. One child, a boy named Noah, unintentionally short-circuited an entire section of the facility with a sudden burst of energy, frying the security systems and forcing the research staff to evacuate the building for hours. Another child, Maya, inadvertently manipulated the electromagnetic fields around her containment unit, causing the walls to warp and bend as if responding to her will. It was clear that the Empire's technology, even its most sophisticated equipment, was no match for the raw, unrefined power the children wielded. Even more unsettling was the fact that the children themselves seemed largely unaware of what they were doing. There was no malice in their actions, no intention to cause harm. They were simply responding to the world around them, using their powers in ways they didn't fully understand. As the days went by, the diplomats and scientists tried to adapt, developing new methods to control and contain the children. But every new attempt only brought them closer to disaster. The children began to form bonds with one another, strengthening their collective will and communication. Despite the Empire's attempts to isolate them, the children communicated telepathically, using their burgeoning psychic abilities to communicate over long distances, bypassing the technological barriers the Empire had put in place. What began as a solitary experiment soon turned into a coordinated rebellion. The first sign of the children's true potential came when they collectively decided to escape. It wasn't a deliberate act of defiance, but rather a shared desire for freedom that triggered an event the Empire had not foreseen. On the night of their attempted escape, the children unknowingly activated a psychic resonance that reverberated across the facility, triggering a cascade of failures in the Empire's security systems. Lights flickered, doors unlocked, and the facility's automated defenses went offline. In a matter of moments, the children found themselves free from their containment units, roaming the halls of the facility. Panic spread among the research staff as the children, still disoriented but now fully aware of their newfound freedom, began to use their abilities with greater purpose. One child, a girl named Lily, seemed to tap into an ancient ability to manipulate time itself. For a brief moment, time within the facility slowed to a crawl, giving the children precious seconds to make their way to the exit. Meanwhile, the other children displayed a wide range of abilities, from telekinetic powers that moved objects with a mere thought to elemental control over fire, water, and even the wind. The facility, once a bastion of Imperial control, became a chaotic, almost surreal environment as the children's powers began to manifest fully. In the midst of the confusion, the Empire's diplomats scrambled to regain control of the situation. They had not anticipated the full scope of the children's abilities, and they had no idea how to stop the rebellion once it had begun. Their attempts to sedate the children or use force to subdue them were futile. The children's collective will and power were too much for even the Empire's most advanced weapons. The more they tried to contain the children, the more they inadvertently fed into the chaos, causing the children's powers to grow stronger and more unpredictable. It quickly became apparent that the children were no longer merely reacting to the Empire's actions, they were now actively fighting back. It was as if their collective power had unlocked a latent force within them, a force that could alter the fabric of reality itself. Entire sections of the facility began to warp and distort, reality bending in ways that even the Empire's most seasoned scientists couldn't comprehend. Time and space themselves seemed to become fluid, as though the children's combined psychic force was beginning to unravel the very laws of the universe. The diplomats were forced to abandon their original plan and shift to damage control. The idea of capturing and studying the children had been replaced with one of survival. They realized that if they didn't act fast, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for the Empire's research facility, but for the entire galaxy. The children, though still innocent in their intentions, were on the verge of triggering a cataclysmic event that could ripple through space-time itself. As the children made their way toward the facility's main control room, they seemed to act with a newfound sense of purpose. They were no longer simply acting on instinct or reflex. They were working together, using their combined abilities to disable the facility's defense systems, shutting down the locks and barriers that stood between them and freedom. It was as though they had discovered the true extent of their power, and with it, a deep understanding of their ability to reshape the world around them. The diplomats, now realizing they were no longer in control, attempted to negotiate with the children, offering them promises of peace and safety in exchange for their cooperation. But the children, united in their desire for freedom, were no longer willing to listen to the Empire's empty promises. They were done being caged and studied. They were done being pawns in a game they didn't understand. The Empire had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. As the final barriers fell and the children began to escape, the diplomats had no choice but to issue a desperate warning to the Empire's leaders: Earth's children were no longer a potential asset to be controlled. They were a force to be reckoned with, and if they were not stopped, the consequences could extend far beyond the confines of their planet. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's children, and now they were about to learn just how dangerous it was to do so. The true power of humanity, as the diplomats had discovered too late, lay not in their adult warriors or advanced technology, but in their children, who, left unchecked, had the power to tear the galaxy apart. As the children, now fully aware of their abilities and their potential, broke free from their captors, the Empire's control of the situation deteriorated rapidly. The once tight grip that the diplomats had hoped to maintain over the children was slipping through their fingers, and the more they struggled to regain control, the stronger and more focused the children became. What began as a simple, covert experiment had now evolved into an all-out crisis, one that could have catastrophic consequences for the Empire, and for the galaxy as a whole. Inside the facility, the children were beginning to realize the extent of their powers. They had instinctively reacted to their circumstances, but now they were taking active control. The psychic link between them seemed to have evolved, strengthening with every passing moment. They could communicate without speaking, and the more they worked together, the more their powers amplified. The ability to manipulate the physical world around them was no longer something they simply stumbled upon. They were starting to direct their powers with precision, creating and destroying at will. The facility itself seemed to be shifting, as if the structure itself was responding to their collective energy. Noah, the boy who had once accidentally short-circuited a part of the facility, now used his ability intentionally. He could channel raw energy in such a way that the Empire's advanced systems, with all their technological superiority, failed to contain him. The security grids that had once been impervious were now nothing more than fragile barriers, easily breached. He could sense the electrical systems in the walls, in the weapons systems, and he manipulated them with the ease of a seasoned hacker. Maya, with her power over electromagnetic fields, worked alongside him, ensuring that nothing could stop their progress. But it was Lily, the girl who had discovered the ability to slow time, who posed the greatest threat. As time itself bent and warped under her influence, the diplomats and scientists found themselves helpless in her presence. The technology they relied on to control the situation seemed to grind to a halt. Guards, once ready to engage, now found themselves frozen in place, unable to react to the children's movements. It was as though the laws of physics had been suspended, giving the children an upper hand they could not have imagined before. At the heart of the chaos, the diplomats were in full panic mode. They had sent for reinforcements, but the children's powers were far more advanced than they had expected. What was meant to be a study of an advanced species was quickly spiraling into a nightmare scenario. The Empire had misjudged the children, thinking them to be fragile, innocent beings who could be controlled and used for political gain. Instead, they were facing a collective force of unimaginable power. The situation outside the research facility was equally dire. The Empire's fleet, stationed in orbit around Earth, had been monitoring the developments below, but they were not prepared for the power unleashed by the children. As the children grew in strength, they began to affect more than just the facility. The very atmosphere around the planet began to tremble, and strange anomalies began to appear in space. Time distortion rippled out from the facility, creating temporal rifts that were felt even by the fleet in orbit. At first, these anomalies were small, flickers of light, brief flashes of distortion, but they soon grew more intense. Ships in orbit began experiencing gravity fluctuations, sudden jumps in space-time, and disruptions to their communications systems. On the ground, the children were growing more confident, their powers now fully unleashed. They could feel the resonance between their collective energy and the world around them. In a synchronized moment, the children acted as one, channeling their abilities into a singular force that shook the very fabric of Earth itself. A shockwave rippled through the planet's core, sending tremors across continents and triggering powerful energy surges in the atmosphere. Lightning arced through the skies, and the oceans seemed to rise and fall in unnatural patterns. The Empire, realizing that they were now dealing with something far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated, scrambled to respond. Their fleets began to mobilize, but their ships were ineffective against the children's powers. What had been a simple, exploratory mission had now escalated into a full-scale crisis that threatened to destabilize not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. The diplomats' earlier attempts to engage in peaceful negotiations seemed laughable in the face of the raw power the children were unleashing. It became clear that the Empire had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated the power of Earth's children, and now they were paying the price. Every time they tried to contain the children, every effort to subdue them only seemed to fuel their rage and desperation. The children, once isolated and confused, were now united in their defiance. They were no longer acting out of fear or ignorance, they were fighting back with purpose. In the Empire's command center, a heated debate raged. Some leaders still argued that the children's abilities could be exploited, that the power they wielded could be harnessed for the Empire's benefit. But others, those who had witnessed the growing instability firsthand, argued that the children were a threat that could not be controlled. They warned that if the Empire continued to push them, they risked provoking a force that could annihilate entire civilizations. It was at this moment that the true scale of the children's abilities became clear. As the diplomats and imperial commanders watched, the children began to tap into something beyond their physical environment. They were no longer just manipulating their surroundings, they were manipulating the very essence of the galaxy itself. Energy flows, cosmic forces, even time and space were bending to their will. The laws of the universe, long considered immutable, were no longer constants. The children, in their sheer willpower, were unraveling the foundations of existence. The final turning point came when the children, standing together in a synchronized bond, focused their combined energy outward. The explosion of psychic force sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, creating rifts in space-time that disrupted the very fabric of reality. The Empire's fleet was thrown into disarray as temporal rifts tore through their ships. Some vessels were pulled into unknown dimensions, while others were thrown across vast stretches of space, beyond the reach of the Empire's control. The children's power had reached its zenith, and they were no longer merely resisting, they were reshaping the galaxy on a fundamental level. At this moment, the diplomats realized that the galaxy had underestimated humanity. Earth's children were no longer a minor threat, they had become a force capable of altering the fate of entire civilizations. The Empire had thought it could control the situation, but it was clear that the children's potential was limitless. With a single thought, the children had unraveled the Empire's plans and begun a chain of events that would forever alter the balance of power in the galaxy. The children had proven that the greatest threat the Empire had ever faced wasn't in the form of mighty warriors or advanced technology. It was in the innocence and untapped potential of human children, children who, when united, could harness a power so vast that no empire, no matter how advanced, could ever hope to control it. The galaxy would never be the same again.